Here we go. Human Animal Bond Association monthly conversation. And this one is going to be like one you've never heard before. I can assure you, or your money back, which is easy to do because it's free in the first place. The Human Animal Bond Association is all about supporting what matters most. I mean, you wouldn't be here watching this, I don't think, if there wasn't a human animal bond. Veterinarian like Dr. Patrick Flynn, there he is, Dr. Patrick Flynn, wouldn't be a veterinarian if there wasn't a human animal bond. There'd be no job for him to do. The zookeepers at the zoo wouldn't be doing their job if there wasn't, believe it or not. And the list goes on and on and on and on. And we're going to be talking about some of that. We're going to be talking about a topic that you don't think of when you talk about the human animal bond. It'll drive you batty. We're talking about bats. Crazy, right? But bats are very much a part of the human animal bond, and really, really in the news because of the pandemic. We'll talk about that. But also without them, you wouldn't be here. What? Is that too strong a statement? Maybe not, because a mosquito disease would kill you, or we wouldn't have stuff to eat because nothing would be pollinated. And Dr. Flynn will explain all of that. And here he is, Dr. Patrick Flynn, professional services veterinarian at Zoetis, also the incoming president of the Human Animal Bond Association. And if you go to veterinary conferences, one of those speakers that you're going to hear a lot of because he is at many of those conferences, Dr. Flynn!
Hey! Wow.
Now, man, what we want people to do, the Human Animal Bond Association's a membership organization. We want you to consider joining. And that is haba.net. At least I think that's right. By the way, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you could type them out in the chat, and we want to have a conversation with you. Haba.net. It's an organization that is not expensive to join, especially right now. The price, I understand, Dr. Flynn, may go up because all the prices. So this is a good time to join for that reason, if nothing else. But because of what you get events like this. And you're also supporting us speaking, not us, but us having speakers about the bond at a variety of different veterinary conferences. It supports us, not Dr. Flynn and myself necessarily, but the organization supporting education about the bond at veterinary schools to students. And also to all of you, whether you are a cat breeder, whether you are a farmer who has 6 cows. I don't know, why not? It doesn't matter. If you're at all interested in the human animal bond, this organization, I think, is worthwhile because it's not an expensive thing to do. And tonight, one night only, you get stuff. And I want Dr. Flynn to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, well, thanks, Steve. I mean, you're right. I love talking about all this kind of stuff, and I think we're not unique to talk about human animal bond at Human Animal Bond Association, but I do think we've been pretty trailblazing in talking about additional things. The bond, what we talk about the bond so often is typically what we mean in those words is the human pet bond, which is super important for many, many reasons. But it's smaller than that, and it's bigger than that, and so it includes all sorts of different creatures, which is why we've been talking about bees and bats and all sorts of other kind of important little creatures that relate to our connection to the human world or to the natural world. So I'm happy. I think it's something we've got some cooler stuff coming in the future. So really an inexpensive addition to your membership list. So really think about joining our group. I think you'll really be happy. Again, whoever you are, we'll welcome you. It's not veterinary only. It's just focus, but yeah, we're open to everybody. So please think about that. And while you're doing that, some cool stuff for tonight. So no joke. So let me talk. Since we're talking about bats tonight, I've got some fun stuff. Let me start with this little one. I swear none of this stuff I wanna send away and give away. Look at this little one. Oh my goodness.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. This is the cutest little face. So to me, that looks like a small, maybe a big brown bat, little brown bat. I don't know. So this little guy is available to win tonight if you become a member, but it doesn't end with that. This I think is the coolest thing. This t-shirt. Hold on. Boop a boo. Look at that.
That is so cool, man.
That is super cool.
I love that. What kind of bat is that?
I don't know. It doesn't matter, I guess.
It looks like, yeah, I think you know what? I would argue a flying fox of some kind.
It could be. It looks like a big guy.
Yep. There's different species of flying fox, but I think that's, I'd be willing to bet that's a flying fox of some kind.
This is a conversation starter.
So I would wear that shirt.
So would I.
Does it glow in the dark?
I don't know. I hope so.
Does it have echolocation?
No, it doesn't. That's the extra model. I didn't get that one.
And there's one more thing.
And one more. I've got a book on bats. So this is it's 400 pages. Wow. And it's done by a bat specialist who's also a photographer. So you get the coolest stuff. It's about 288 different species of bats, and in all their good stuff and their locations and all that stuff. So if you're really a bat person or you want to become one, we got that for you. So those 3 things are coming. And what we'll do is do a kind of a drawing at the end of this after we're off air, and then we'll let people know via Facebook tomorrow.
Yeah. So we will announce we'll announce the winner. Or winners, really, because we have 3 items. So here's the deal. You join the Human Animal Bond Association, you're automatically enrolled to win one of those 3 things. If you're very lucky, you'll be one of 3 people joining, and that's it. And then you're sure to get something. I doubt that'll be the case, but this is way better than the lottery, because there aren't going to be 1 million people, though I wish there were, joining. So the odds are pretty good. You'll get one of those 3 things. And you may be able to even bargain for the one you want. That book, by the way, has everything you've ever wanted. There isn't a thing about bats. Nothing about bats that's not in that book or in the head of Dr. Patrick Flynn. So I want to start here, Dr. Flynn. Why are we here? Why are we even talking about bats in a human-animal bond talk? After all, I don't think many of us have a pet bat.
No, and you shouldn't. You don't want a pet bat. But bats are integral to our existence. And in fact, bats have been around long before we ever saw a human footprint in the dirt. They've been around for a good while and doing their thing and continue to do. They provide us things that we may not even know that they do on our daily basis. Bats are freaky to people. You look up in the sky, if you happen to see one now and then, you're like, oh my God, those things have come from hell, or I don't want anything to do with bats. They're like flying rats or something. I don't know what those things are. And all those things are wrong, except that they fly. And they do fly. They are the only mammal that actually generates lift, and they can fly. They have all the same bones that we do, which is kind of cool. And as of 2020, there are about 1,420 species of bats located all over the planet, and they are the 2nd most common mammal on the surface of the earth. So clearly they're here for a reason. And I talk about the 3 big P's. And even before that, just for a sec, because I think why are we talking about this in general? If you're a veterinarian or you're an animal care person in any way, or even a groomer or a trainer or any of those types of things, there is a kind of an educational bank account that you have with your clients or customers or whoever. And to know cool little things about other little creatures and other parts of the bond that you can kind of just flip out like a playing card now and then in a very small little snippet allows them to realize that you have a deeper understanding about things than they really realize. And that's for the reason I think it's important to talk about this stuff. But the 3 P's I talk about with bats are pollination, poop, and another one I forgot.
Okay, let's go back. You'll think of the 3rd one. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Or I'll think of it, because we've talked about it before. So one of us will think of it. Let's go to the first one first. So let's talk about pollination. So people may have some understanding that some species of bats are important pollinators, but I don't think people understand the extent of that.
No, they don't. And the reality is that bats are able to ingest and catch over 1,000 mosquitoes an hour when they're out and about. And typically
okay, so that's the third P, parasites.
Oh, parasites. Thank you.
You're welcome. But let's talk about pollination.
Yeah, so my brain is full of bad stuff. It's all oozing out of my ears.
So let's go in order. So let's talk about pollination. I think that's important because I like tequila. Explain what we're talking about.
Yes. So these guys are pollinators. I think the bats get the bees get all the good press, but bats actually are pollinators as well in multiple different ways, which actually relates back to the poop, but we'll get there. They pollinate multiple different plants, and they are a big help if you're into bananas, mangoes, and particularly agave plants. They are responsible for pollinating agave plants. And if you know anything about agave, that's where tequila comes from. So thank you very much, bats, for tequila. And in fact, if you look the next time you're at the liquor store, or if you have some at home, take a look at the Bacardi label, and their logo is indeed a bat. In addition, there are some flowers that flower at night that bats are able to pollinate. Some of them just flower at one night of the year, and bats are there to help. So they help in an enormous amount with pollination of several different plants for free. Don't ask anything for it, and allow us to have what we have.
Well, I think that's, coffee also you didn't mention, and I believe bats are responsible for it. So if you get up in the morning and have a sip of coffee, don't thank Mrs. Olson. Probably you're too young to remember who I'm even talking about. But instead, thank bats, because they're responsible for it. And in fact, in Colombia, what they've done is they have a program, actually, to protect the bats to ensure that their plants are pollinated. So in Colombia, coffee is like champagne, I've learned. So truly, bats are significant pollinators, Dr. Flynn. It's not as though, they're there and they pollinate some stuff. Without them on this planet, we would be without, and you didn't mention, I think it's jackfruit. I mean, there's all these. The list is long.
It is. And so they are, and again, they are so specialized. Again, we have almost 1,500 different types of species, and they're doing all different types, eating different things, all serving a different purpose as they go about their evening duties. And the amazing thing, I think, from our point of view, is we don't really think about them because they operate basically invisibly to us, but are still dramatically important to us, and unfortunately are easily affected by our activities as well.
All right, that's a great transition that you're helping us make to parasites.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the biggie there is that they do what's estimated about $4 billion worth of work for us every year on parasite removal. And there's a really cool, if you've been to Austin, there's a bridge there where they come out every night, but multiple places throughout the West and then into Mexico where these guys come out in the millions every evening. And you can see them on Doppler radar when they come out. There's so many of them. And most of these guys are operating over agricultural fields and other places in different types of airspace, literally, and nailing these little teeny tiny, something about a tenth the size of their body weight. And they're able to eat 1,000 mosquitoes each per hour and take out unbelievable amounts of mosquitoes, which we know spread all sorts of both animal and human related disease, which it's just beyond belief what they're able to do with a brain smaller in some cases than a peanut, and to be able to echolocate and deal all the things and actually fly better than any fighter pilot ever has, and still be able to get a little mosquito 1,000 times an hour and then navigate home and get back into their group in their cave or wherever they live.
I know it depends on the species, but how many mosquitoes might a bat consume in one evening?
Well, I mean, you just multiply. They're out about 8 hours, in the evening. So, I mean, that's like, who knows, 8 to 10,000 mosquitoes a piece. I mean, there's still a lot to be had out there. But think about what that saves us: the amount of effort and money and toxins and sprays and all the stuff that we don't have to put into the air or onto our food, because these little ones are out there working for us every night.
Indeed. So there is encephalitis that is spread by mosquito in this country. Zika kind of still exists, spread by mosquitoes. The biggest problem, I believe, is malaria, not a problem for the United States so much as it is for Central and South America and mostly Africa.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. So if you're talking about, I'm not very good at math, but if you're talking about like millions of bats, literally millions of bats, many of those bats consuming 1,000 mosquitoes each, not to mention other insects, but 1,000 mosquitoes each, I'm thinking we would be overrun on this planet by mosquitoes.
I have to agree. I wonder, I've always wondered, like, what is the purpose of mosquitoes? These are, I'm in Florida, and I'm like, God, these are just worthless little creatures. But maybe I figured it out. Maybe we know why they exist now, and probably other reasons too. But it is, they are fuel for our wonderful bats.
Yes, or bats exist to zap the mosquitoes. It might be the other way around. I don't know. I don't know. You need communication with somebody up there, I guess. Indeed, all right, so we've got 2 of the 3 P's. The third P you said, and I'm curious about this, is poop.
It's poop. Any good list has to end with poop. So poop, otherwise known as guano, so that's a kind of fancier name for bat poop, is loaded with nitrogen. It's super valuable fertilizer. In fact, you can buy little bags of guano on Amazon. But as you imagine, it would be a little different. It's difficult to get. It won't come in hundreds of thousands of pounds. One has to actually go into a bat cave and recover it, which has its own concerns and health worries. But the cool part is this is used in all, as you said, additional level with coffee and other parts of the world for fertilizing the actual plants in the dirt. Secondarily, they are out there eating all those mosquitoes, and they're pooping during their flight. And so they're actually kind of salt shakering down guano over those fields that they're flying over and removing mosquito. And lastly, this is kind of a fun one if you're into weird bugs and spiders and stuff, but in a bat environment, bats like to know their edges. So they're close to each other. They're not totally jammed in, but they like to stay together, and they're very family oriented, and they like to live together close. So just below them are giant piles of guano. And what lives in there are an unbelievable diversity of all sorts of little creatures, from bacteria to insects and beetles and all sorts of things, who probably don't even realize they're getting this wonderful gift from above from bats. But they serve to supply that whole population of biodiversity as well. So bats are givers. They just are.
All right, let's talk about what bats, and it varies because species of bats are about as big as, I don't know, my finger, smaller even, to the various larger flying foxes that are larger than most any eagle. I mean, they're that large.
They're big.
Yeah, they're that big. I mean, you're talking about a 6-foot plus wingspan. So as tall as you are, of course, that's about your height, I suspect. So is a bat. I mean, it's quite incredible, the diversity there. But more, and therefore the diversity of where they live, the diversity of what they eat. In fact, I think they live on every continent except Antarctica.
I believe you're right.
Yeah. So, but let's bust some myths about bats, or offer some intel that only you can offer. You mentioned in passing, and I want to make a point out of this, that they're family oriented. Are they? Can you go a little further? And are bat moms good moms?
Oh my gosh, you're gonna love this. You guys out there too. So this is recent data. This is kind of just a little bit before the pandemic, but they are a wonderful family. And because little bat babies only come along once a year or a little bit longer than that, they are exceedingly important. In fact, bat babies are called pups. Bat pups are very important not only to mom and dad but to the whole group. Again, for that reason, they're not they're not rodents. They don't have huge clutches of. Then the reason why rodents do is because only a few of those little guys are going to survive. They have their one pup, and it's very important to them, and again, the whole group. They will allo mother, so they will take care of each other's babies if for whatever reason one mom is away or along those lines. And the most dramatic example is that bat moms will fly with their babies attached to them, to their nipples. Well, they fly, even though they're about 20% of their mom's weight. But the coolest thing that we just learned is that bats speak to their babies. That's not the new thing. Bat pups learn to make specific cries as far as when they're alone or they feel like they're alone, they make individual cries. And after a while, they all actually synchronize into the same noise. But initially, they all make their own little sounds. And of course, mom and dad recognize their own babies. The mothers particularly speak to their babies in a different tone than they do to mom when mom and dad speak to each other, and it's called motherese. It's a high pitched, soft, just like we do when we go, oh, little baby, or little baby. They do
Is
the
that
same
what you do?
with their own little ones, and it's been you can graph it out. When they speak to each other in the group, and then they go to their baby and they go. So they are very, very careful and very loving with their little ones. And I think that's important for us to realize, how detailed and how kind of cool other little creatures can be, and how important their little ones are to them as ours are to us.
Now, I'm not a linguist, so it's, kind of a fine line as to whether some of these species actually have syntax, which I believe if you have that, then you have language, according to those who define these things. And if you have grammar, you have language. It has been suggested that dolphins do, including orcas, killer whales. It has been suggested that many whale species do. It has been suggested that chimpanzees do.
Yep.
Gorillas, bonobos, orangutans are relatives to great apes.
Yep.
It has been suggested that parrot species that have been studied do. It has been suggested that bats do. What do you think?
I think we always need to be cautious about defining anything about all the other species on the planet through the human lens. We have just, into those things that you just described, put on our own parameters and our own understanding of language on other creatures who likely communicate in much different ways, which is fine. It's neither here nor there. It's not better or worse. It's what they do. And so we use the word language, but clearly there's communication going on at the level of ants and bees and creatures maybe we haven't even laid eyes on yet on this planet. So however we wish to describe it, I think there is certainly communication going on. And we know that's another mind-blowing thing is when the bats are out hunting, not only are they using echolocation to identify their targets, they are speaking to each other and they know where each other are located. And they have what we suspect to be like call signs, like fighter pilots do. So they know who's who, where they are, even among species. And this is just beyond belief. And so they're still speaking to each other in one frequency, perhaps, and then operating on hunting on another. So I don't know what to say about language or how to define that word, but it does certainly seem to result in communication.
Do bats ever attack people first by getting in their hair, and then doing whatever people think they do? I'm not even sure what they think.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big myths, the hair one. I think that typically is someone with, maybe that happened once with someone with giant hair whose bat got caught in the.
Yes, it did. It happened to Marge Simpson.
It did. There you go. So maybe that's that. But you're not walking down the street at 8:30 at night and having a bat just like come cruising into your hair. That's not happening. Bats do have occasionally, we do worry about exposure to rabies with them. Typically that means they just kind of shut down and they become ill. And so if you find a bat that on the ground, particularly during the day, just in the grass, that's a time to call someone, a rehabber or someone to help. It doesn't mean that they need to be killed immediately or that they have rabies. It may mean that last night they ran out of fuel. They were out too long. They ran out of energy and they cannot land like a bird on a tree and rest for a little while. They just fall out of the sky. But for whatever reason, if you find a bat on the ground just kind of staring back at you, get someone who knows what they're doing. Don't make any major decisions one way or the other, but also don't handle them.
Yeah, and the sad part about that, the only way, to my knowledge, I mean, I may be wrong, to test for rabies, unfortunately, is to kill the animal.
True.
So if that's suspected, it's the demise of that. But yes, of course, don't touch it. And that brings us to another topic. It's not only rabies we're concerned about, and this is the part that's so fascinating to me. We don't know exactly how this coronavirus happened, but it's conceivable that a mix of animals, including a bat, at the so-called wet market in China, where these animals are slaughtered right there, inhumanely for starters, but also without hygiene considerations, anything like we would do in this country. They're mixed together, animals and species from different parts of the world very often. And that is in some cases illegal, that they even have some of these species that are in danger. But they do. And that's what they believe happened with the first coronavirus, SARS coronavirus 1. This is SARS coronavirus 2.
Yep.
I don't want to get into the whole, okay, was it from a lab? Did it really happen at the market? It could have happened, and a bat could have been involved in it. Yep. Can you talk about that a little bit, and how bats can live happily and cohabituate with these viruses that are coronaviruses that many other species can't?
We have much to learn from bats. And they made, there's someone who made a comment, presentation over the summer, that bats are not villains, they're canaries. They're ones we need to be aware of and learn from. Bats are able to hold onto and maintain up to 300 different types of coronaviruses in their little bodies and not get sick. We don't know why. Part of the reason may be because their metabolism is so high and their temperatures run high. But I have to think it's got to be more than that. We just have a lot to learn from these little ones, because again, they don't get sick, and they move in ways that oftentimes avoid us unless we force them into environments where we interact with them or they interact with us, whether we're killing them and eating them, or for whatever reason we have exposure from other species. And that's why we see hantavirus and Nipah virus regularly spilling over into human populations in other parts of the world, like Bangladesh, every few years. So I don't know what happened with this coronavirus either, but we know certainly other viruses, which are top of the list of concern for overall disease in humans, are directly spilling over from bats. So, and mostly, again, we all know a stressed animal or a stressed human who has a virus will become ill. So we need to spend more time figuring things out with bats, seeing what their little bodies are able to do and how they're able to neutralize viruses, and see if we can emulate that. They may, at the end of all this, they may be the key to understanding a lot of this.
Exactly. And scientists are, to my understanding, looking at a variety of bat species as well as some other species, actually, including some shark species. Why don't sharks, get this? Okay, so I've been remiss. I need to get to the questions and the comments here.
Oh, no. Okay.
And friends, if you have any, please add your comments. A reminder that, and this is part of a question too, the only way, and I do say, the only way that you can receive the book, the t-shirt, or the live bat that's really not all that alive. There's the book. Let's show them all.
Here's the bat. I'm picking them up.
Yeah. It kind of looks like it's alive. Looks like a Beanie Baby bat. But it's
all right. Well, but yeah, he's very nice. Bat. He doesn't have rabies.
And I don't know the species of that one. I'll leave that.
I don't either. It's whichever one you want it to be. And then this is
that is so cool. I love that. Okay, so we have one that said, when I said what's on the t-shirt, and I thought it might be a flying fox species, of which there are many. Patricia said, no, it's a chihuahua.
An upside down chihuahua.
Let's see. Dana says we're really cool. Well, we know that. Thank you very much, Dana. I want to correct you. You said that the only mammal species that flies is a bat. You are not considering the flying nun.
And flying nun?
You're not even old enough to know what I'm talking about.
I had not considered the flying nun.
Never mind. It's a Sally Field thing.
Yeah, I faintly remember that. Okay, all right. She's a mammal. I'll give you that. The gliding.
Julie, he's saying I'm old. Okay. Do bats have high body temperatures?
They do. They do, as as a lot of little small animals do, but particularly them, because these guys work really hard. Again, when they go out, they are kind of like fighter jets or like gliders, maybe more, in that they don't really have landing gear. And so when they go out at night, they run around and do their thing, and they've got to make it back safely, and fuel up during their run. There's a whole separate discussion about them drinking. It's very difficult technically for them to drink. Where was I going with that? And so that activity is a lot. So those guys are working hard every night, and so they run real high temperatures, which again may be part of the reason that they're able to maintain viral, not infections, but viral levels, and not have clinical signs.
So when bats drink, different species do it different ways, I know. Some drink from actually little pools inside certain types of plants in Central and South America, but mostly they drink from ponds and rivers and lakes. Can you describe why it's difficult and how they do that, and what the risk is?
Yeah.
Because there is a risk, which I could talk about as well, that I happen to know about.
There is. The way most bats in North America, to my understanding, drink is by skimming over the top of the water. So this is really technically difficult. They'll come in with their mouths open and just skim right on top of the water and pick up a little bit of water. Now, if they're pooped out and they're really, really tired, that's a very dangerous thing to do, because if they get stuck in the water, they're done. And so, unfortunately, what we've seen in some locations, particularly out west, where they used to really be out by themselves in the desert, not beating up, love Las Vegas. If you're out in Western states, come here. We'll talk about bats again. But Las Vegas is unfortunately an easy example. This huge, big, bright spot in the middle of the desert, which attracts unbelievable amounts of insects. And then so secondarily attracts bats. And in some cases, it's too far for them to commute from home to get to where the insects are and get back and still have enough energy to drink and get home. So what we call their patch is extended beyond what they should be normally be able to fly. So that's a problem. Light pollution is a huge problem for bats, except for those who actually learn to deal with that. And I bet you'll see some in Chicago that have figured it out and do well. Bats are able to adjust pretty well. But it is a fascinating thing about how bats are able to drink, and it's another way, unfortunately, that we mess them up a little bit. Sometimes really flat parking lots, or even sunroofs on cars and other things that sonically they see as water. They will continue to come circle back around and hit over and over and over again and try and drink. And meanwhile, they're burning their own fuel that they really should be using to go home.
Yeah, great answer. And akin to that, sometimes predators know where there are lots of bats, the places that they drink from. And those predators can be fish of some types.
Yep.
They can be alligators, actually, that are in waiting for bats, which is fascinating. I've seen video of that. It's fascinating to watch. That's part of Beth's answer to her question. But I'll let you finish it off. What are their biggest predators?
Well, I think you mentioned the biggies. I think they anytime that they're at risk, other airborne creatures sometimes will get them, but I think their biggest concern, or their biggest predators, would be other kind of meat eaters on the ground. I think, at least my experience, is when they hit the ground or they wind up in the water, then they're dead meat, unfortunately, to whoever wants to get them. At night, though, I don't think that there's anything. I mean, I could be wrong here as far as somebody going out and actually actively hunting them, but I think it's more when they get themselves in a situation of peril.
Well, the other big predator to bats is actually, in the United States at this moment, a fungus.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Can you talk about that a little bit, and why that's really scary to us? Because if bats, even if we're talking about a handful of species, disappear, that's going to be a lot more mosquitoes, for starters.
Yeah, true. Yeah, so this is a fungus that affects their upper respiratory tracts and their nasal septum, their noses particularly, while some of the bats that hibernate are hibernating. And it just basically eats into their nose and does all sorts of damage to them, and it has caused dramatic amounts of death in bat populations. Unfortunately, my understanding too is that this is aggravated by people who like to go, exploring caves and hiking and stuff, and get this fungus on their shoes and move from place to place and infect one place to another and can worsen the situation. I don't think we've had any really great success in containing this. So right now, that's really the biggest threat to bats' lives is actually a fungus.
Yeah, and I don't take credit for that. It's Beth who I think brought that up with lots of good questions that Beth is bringing up. Are flying squirrels considered actually flying squirrels and or flying mammals? Tina wants to know that. What she's not asking is about Rocky the flying squirrel.
Oh, squirrel and moose.
Yes.
Flying squirrels, I think, are misnamed. Flying squirrels glide. Bats actually generate, and some people still think, I've talked to people who think like bats are like mice and they have legs and feet and then their wings come off like angels out the back of them or something. But these are their wings. They actually are their wings, and then they're sleeping bags at night. They're able to wrap themselves up. They're multi-purpose. But those guys are able to generate flight and move around again more aggressively than any fighter aircraft we've ever built.
And you're an aircraft guy.
I am.
Dr. Flynn says, Barb, I love bats and appreciate their contributions to our environment. Wondering about them being vectors to disease transmission.
Yeah.
We kind of touched on that. Do they give other animals, other mammals, or even other bats disease? Do you know?
Well, yeah. I mean, the most common ones there are where we worry about secondary infection to humans. So we know that pigs have been infected by bat viral diseases, particularly horses. Hendra virus in other parts of the world, particularly Australia, has been a concern, particularly for veterinarians. That's really been a worry. Thankfully, the numbers have been, low numbers and like less than 50 people, but the mortality rate is like 60%. So what's a cool story really about that is, as far as what we're able to do is exposing other creatures, is getting to understand again what species of bat are we dealing with and how do they normally live. Most of the time they don't want anything to do with us, and they really aren't interested in messing with pigs unless they are under pressure or an environment that they used to be in has been removed. And what they found in Australia is that they had about a half a year where everything was happy and the horses were not getting infected. And then about a half a year where all of a sudden the bats would come into the stalls and we'd see horses being infected from guano and from exposure to saliva and things like that. And when they made the connection,
are the bats biting the horses? How does that happen?
No, not in that environment. They're contaminating the environment.
I see. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and veterinarians are getting it from, again, exposure fluids and stuff like that. Is my understanding. Anyway, so they were infecting animals, and in addition, they had built a citrus farm, and I think the bats were over there having a good time on the oranges, and then exposing other animals. And what they found was during the winter time, there used to be a whole different type of species of tree that would flower, and the bats would head that way, and they loved to not only pollinate that flower, but it gave off sap, and they ate that sap, and they spent their days over there. But due to development and a whole bunch of other things, those trees were mostly removed. So the bats had to find other environments to survive in until another species bloomed in the spring. And so what they were able to do is to figure that out and then repopulate those trees and those plants. So then year round, the bats didn't come by anymore, and we didn't see nearly as much, if any, of infection of the horses of that particular virus. So it's at that high level that we need to think about viral control, because once we get all these layers lower, then we get really in the difficult place that we're in now, where we have a virus raging around the planet. And if we can start to think about how we can control these things from a environmental control point of view early on, it's so much easier.
Absolutely. And in fact, something that I don't remember what I was going to say. So let me say this. One question here is, how many species, I'm looking for who asked that question, but somebody did, I'm not imagining it. How many species of bats are there? You can now, before you answer, Dr. Flynn, if you win the book, that'll tell you, I'm sure.
It probably will.
Tells you everything about bats.
Well, here's the thing, though. It's changing, so that whatever answer I give will probably change in a couple of months. because there are a bunch of bats rolling around the planet that we have yet to even identify. We identify about 10 new species a year. Right now, as of 2020, we're at 1,421 species of bats.
Wow.
But I'll bet you that's gone up. The book covers 288. So that's all I can do for you. But it's amazing how diverse these little creatures are.
Indeed. All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot here.
Yeah.
When it comes to bats. So I want to remind you that we do this every month with somebody who's an expert, maybe not on bats, but something related to the human-animal bond. I'm trying to think of some of the others we've done. I believe we talked to Dr. Robin Downing about identifying pain in your pets. We talked to, I don't remember them all, Becky Mosser, a certified veterinary technician, about parasites, talking about ticks and fleas and heartworm disease in our pets and prevention of that. We talked to Dr. Marty Becker about the Fear-Free Initiative and the emotional well-being of our animals. This is our first conversation about bats. Maybe it won't be our last. That I don't know. But I do know I want to thank Dr. Flynn now one more time. For those who might have just joined us, HABA.net. You can join the organization, the Human Animal Bond Association, and you might get this. Ooh.
One more time. Yeah. This little one. Where is he? There we go.
Or this.
Or this.
The flying bat. What's that bat's name?
Whatever you want it to be.
Oh.
I don't know.
Okay.
Just says Wild Republic.
Okay, we'll call that bat. Let's see. Beth's asked the most questions, I think, so we'll call it Beth. And then there's the book.
Then the book.
The book.
The book. All about everything you'd ever want to know about bats and the coolest pictures ever.
Yep. Authored by Julie Legrid. So Julie has put all this together and has done all the technical stuff. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. Thank you all very much for your comments. HABA, HABA.net. That's the organization. What's most important, we want you to join, but what's most important is that you got something out of this. Maybe a bit of entertainment and hopefully squelching some misinformation that's out there about bats. Dr. Flynn, always good to talk to you. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Steve.